Today I have with me Barry Ward. He was the Ward 4 councillor for 22 years, and now he's running for mayor of Barry. He also served as deputy mayor when Mayor Jeff Lehman was on leave of absence. Thank you so much, Barry, for joining me today.
You're welcome, and thanks, Deepak. Thanks for the invitation from Barry Community Media.
Yeah, before getting into your campaign and the future plan, I just wanted to talk a little bit about your past. You have served for 22 years on the council for Ward 4. So that was even before, I believe, Mayor Jeff Lehman started his term as the councillor. So you are the veteran. The problems of the city for a long time. So what few of the problems that you have consistently seen over the last 22 years?
The number one complaint that councillors get has never changed in those 22 years. It's about traffic. Specifically, people complain about cars speeding down their streets. And we've tried to address it in multiple ways. We've increased enforcement. We've tried to increase enforcement. We put in changed road design. We put in speed cushions. We put in flashing signs. It's all towards helping the problem. The complaints are still coming in. They haven't stopped. So it's still a problem. I don't know what the answer is. In fact, we are introducing photo radar in school zones, which the province is allowing us to do. I'd love to see photo radar expanded everywhere, but I think even having it in school zones will at least make drivers aware, because the same people that are speeding on your local streets are probably speeding in front of schools. So once they get a few tickets, it may get them to slow down. I'm a big believer in photo radar. I think it's worked in other places. Alberta certainly has photo radar everywhere, and I've been to Alberta and people drive the speed limit. I think it's because they know photo radar is around. So we'll see, but that's the number one complaint. In the last 3 or 4 years, noise has become a big complaint. We've got a lot more noise complaints. And that's also that's one that's tough to solve as well, but we're making attempts. We've started noise blitzes. I've got a few ideas of my own that I think we can use to address the problem. We need the province to act. When the province did away with the emissions tests in 2019, which may have been a good thing to do, they eliminated the one way we were catching noisy and modified mufflers. It's the Wild West out there in terms of modified mufflers. There is no way to catch modified mufflers. And in fact, the province has refused to enact legislation banning modified mufflers, despite pleas of municipalities to do it. Anyways, those are the two major complaints, and they were the complaints back then. And there's certainly been other areas that have, the opioid crisis wasn't even on the radar 22 years ago. Our homeless situation has gotten much worse over the last few years. So there are areas as well that we're getting a lot more issues that we're dealing with in greater numbers these days.
Yeah, definitely, and I would like to get more into that topics as well. But I want to start with you were when Mayor Jeff Lehman was on leave of absence, when he was running for the provincial election. You worked as a mayor of Barry. So what do you think those experiences contributed any new learnings and for you to take on the job full time?
Yeah, well, it certainly created more interest in me. I mean, I've been deputy mayor for the past 4 years, and that means I've sat in on many meetings with senior staff and been a lot more involved in the city than you do as a councillor. But when Mayor Lehman was on his leave of absence, I actually was in his office, and I found it I loved working with staff. I loved knowing about what the problems were, how staff were dealing with them, meeting with the senior staff. I really enjoyed that part of the job. And it actually, I would not have run against Mayor Lehman if he had run again as mayor. I agree on most issues. But once he decided to step aside and I had a taste of what it was like, I thought, yeah, this is a job I think I know I can do.
Yeah, and that an interesting point you raised, that you agree with him on a lot of issues. So that, in a sense, everyone knows, he won with a landslide last two election, more than 80% votes. I don't know that if that happened in the past, but he has been very, very popular mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you see him? It's more, is it ideology or it's more convenience for you to run on the same platform that that he ran on.
Yeah, I mean, we don't agree on every single issue. I mean, we take a different approach to the leadership issue, but I think on most general issues, we had a similar philosophy. You know, the need to, you know, not just attack the symptoms, but to treat, you know, the causes of various things that are the problem in the city. And I think we both have a big emphasis on planning. You know, if we plan properly, we can avoid a lot of problems down the road.
And what are the issues you would say you disagree with him on?
Disagree with him on? You know, I'm not, maybe it's more of a leadership style thing. I think I can, you know, I think he did a good job. I think I might be able to work with councillors of various backgrounds better. And I'm not sure why there were certainly councillors that didn't agree with him on issues, and we wasted a lot of time at council when we could have been doing other things. I'm hoping that I can maybe have a broader approach to council and get them working on the same page. On most of the other issues, I think most councillors agree on most things. I mean, most of them agree we need to deal with the homeless situation. We need to deal with the affordable housing crisis that's in Barrie, and we need to protect the environment. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with all of those.
Yeah, and so now you know, getting more into the issues, you know, the major issue everyone is facing is the cost of living. You know, housing prices have gone down, but the interest rates are up, so mortgage is same as it was before. Inflation is going up. Everything is becoming, you know, more expensive, food items and day-to-day items. So from the city of Barrie, you know, what do you think, you know, your plans are to address those issues?
Well, I mean, there's multiple things we can do. We can certainly, you know, from a city standpoint, one of the first things the new council will be doing was dealing with the new budget. And of course, we don't want to, you know, households are already struggling to pay their bills. Many households are struggling to pay their bills. We don't want to burden them with a big tax increase as well. And that will be a big challenge because obviously the city is facing many of the inflationary pressures everybody else is. We're paying more for fuel. We're paying more for vehicles. We're facing all those same things that everybody else is. So it's going to be a tough balancing, but maybe, you know, there might be projects we have to postpone just because this is not the time for a big tax increase. But there's also many other things we can encourage more affordable housing. And Mayor Lehman chaired an affordable housing task force, and it made many recommendations of things we can do. We started implementing some of those. I think it's very important that we implement the rest of them. Affordable housing is not going to be built overnight, but I think we're on the right path with things like allowing housing as a right on institutionally zoned lands. We've had buy-in from the faith community already. They've brought forward proposals for various seniors housing, for example, in my ward, a 90-unit seniors housing, at least half of which would be affordable. And they've actually put in an application. It's not just a dream. They're actually willing to fund it and build it. I think we can do, we can hire a staff person that does nothing but affordable housing. I think that will make a big difference. We can look at alternative forms of housing, container housing, tiny houses. I know the Legion's been interested in tiny houses as a transitional housing for people in the armed forces, leaving the armed forces. Looking at eliminating or at least reducing parking requirements for affordable housing. I think we obviously have to tackle supportive housing as well. And it's not enough to give somebody a house. I mean, I often say, if somebody's homeless and you give them a house, if you don't give them the supports to stay there, they'll be out back on the street or living in a tent in 2 months because you need to support them when they're there. Mental health supports, addiction supports, even just supports on how to live with your neighbors, because I don't know I think a lot of them don't have the skills they need to realize how to hang on to an apartment. So if we get them an apartment, it's really important we surround them with social supports to stay in that apartment, and it'll save society money in the long term. A lot of money is in health costs, a lot of money is in policing. We save money by getting people off the street. Lots of other things we can do, you know, resist raising the fees, recreation fees, everything from all kinds of fees we have at City Hall. It's important we keep those in line to support the people. They don't, you know, it's not a time when people can afford to pay a lot more. As I said, we're facing, you know, we don't want to raise transit fees, but on the other hand, we're paying more for fuel. So it's going to be a balancing job, but we can do it.
Yeah, no. You talked about, you know, homeless and, you know, providing them support. So over the weekend, I know I've interviewed a woman, homeless woman. She was, living in a tent in Milligan's Pond, and she got, it was a fourth ticket she got, and the winter is approaching. It seems that, city has intensified the campaign against the homeless. So many people are getting the tickets. So in terms of, when I was talking to her, her reaction was, if I made to leave this place, I will have to go deep into the bushes, into the hiding, because she doesn't have a place somewhere else to live. So what would be your policy? What would be your stance dealing with people living in tents in the park, in terms of providing them with the housing and the support?
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to go. Those people don't want to go in the shelters for whatever reason, and they all have their own reasons for not wanting to go into the shelter system. There are beds at all times in the shelter system, and I know a lot of them don't want to go in there. Maybe they don't feel safe in the shelter system. Maybe they can't bring in their belongings. Maybe they have pets they can't bring into the shelter system. There could be multiple reasons why, and so we need supportive housing, and supportive housing is very expensive. We need help from the we have to work with our community partners, of course, people that are already working with the homeless, but we also have to get money from the federal and provincial governments. It's very important that we can get more money. It's very expensive. Supportive housing is expensive. I mean, just in last week, we heard about the building at Tiffin and Innisfil, which is being turned into supportive housing. The province has provided $2.5 million to convert that to supportive housing. For some of the hardest to house. And that building was already owned by Simcoe County. So it's not $2.5 million wasn't to purchase it. It was to bring it up to the standards that it could be used for supportive housing. And that would take 14 people off the street. We have about 400 homeless people in Barrie. So you can kind of get an idea of how much it's going to cost, way beyond the resources of the city, which depends on property taxes. It's going to cost tens of millions of dollars to build supportive housing. So we desperately need other people. In the meantime, I agree, we can't make their life more difficult. If we have a bylaw in the books that you can't camp on public lands in the city, we've asked staff to drop a policy. That's our bylaw. Our policy has been to only act on complaints. And I think when the policy comes back to the new city council, we'll have to look at how we're going to deal with situations like that. We just can't say, yeah, anybody's allowed to live on public lands if they want. There have to be some kind of rules, because there are occasions, in my own ward, somebody set up a tent within a few feet of somebody's backyard. I mean, they had a chain link fence and there was literally a tent there. That's probably not acceptable. In fact, most of the homeless do not want to live where they're going to get complaints. But we have to have the bylaw in there. So if there is a case where somebody is in a spot that's causing problems, or if somebody's creating problems, I mean, the police and bylaw regularly patrol the encampments. I've been with them on the patrols. They're not closing people down and issuing tickets. They're acting on complaints. If somebody is very loud, if somebody lets their dogs off the leash and lets them run wild in the neighborhood, those are the kind of things that the city is going to take action on. Occasionally, we go in regularly. City staff go in regularly to clean up the campsites, because they do accumulate a lot of garbage. It's a tricky situation. I know Kitchener is looking at establishing an area where tents can be set up legally and provide the supports. I guess it's something we could look at in Barrie. It's going to be very difficult to find a location. I mean, that might be the answer. I almost hate it. I mean, it's kind of like food banks. I hate the idea that we have food banks, but I recognize they're necessary in our society. I mean, I'd love to see homelessness eliminated. I'd love to see food banks eliminated, but I realize we're not there yet. The only thing I can say is we can treat the people living in tents with compassion, but I think we still need a bylaw in some cases if the tent has to be moved. But I don't think we should be removing tents just because as a policy, removing tents. And we're not doing it now. I mean, some of the encampments have been there for years and we have not cracked down on them. We have not shut them down.
Yeah, and another issue during the last active transportation and sustainability committee, many of the members echoed that many of their recommendations have not been adopted by the council. So it's we have the committees. So in terms of especially when it comes to environment and involving Barrie residents in fighting climate change, in taking care of the environment. So what would be your policy different from the current administration dealing with climate change and environment?
Yeah, well, being on council already and being on it for a long time, I feel necessary to defend the city's policy. I think we've got a very ambitious climate plan. We've promised to cut. Where our target is to cut by 2030, cut our 2018 level of emissions by 45% and be carbon neutral, net zero by 2050. I think that's very ambitious. We've got a plan to do it. We have staff working on it, on everything from buildings to electrifying our fleet, ways to meet those goals. And I think we've done, wonderful things on the environment, in terms of protecting Lake Simcoe. We've spent a lot of money on opening up the creeks that flow into Lake Simcoe, which both improves the water quality and improves the fish habitat. We've got a major project to redo all our stormwater management ponds that aren't up to standard. We have a lot of stormwater management ponds that were built in the 70s and 80s, which are not really stormwater management ponds. They hold the water for a day and then it washes into the creeks that flow into the bay. We've spent a lot of money, $100 million on expanding and upgrading our wastewater plant, our sewage plant, and it means we're actually exceeding the level. We're beating the targets in terms of phosphorus loadings. So I think we are doing a lot. We can always do more. We're always looking for new ideas, but even things like adding bike lanes. I got to tell you, bike lanes are not popular with residents who live on those roads, but to council's credit, in every case, we put in a bike lane over the objections of residents. I'm not saying all residents oppose them on the streets, but there are residents that always complain about them. But we've gone ahead. We have a lot of gaps out there still, but we were doing it. We were making the south end. It's hard to change what's already built, but at least we've learned our lesson. It's in the south end. We're trying to create 15-minute communities, have shopping and services within 15 minutes of everybody's house. And hopefully they'll walk. I mean, I'm fortunate enough, I actually kind of by accident live in a 15-minute community because I live about 10 minutes from Bayfield Street, which has all the services I need. And it doesn't mean I walk every time, although I'll often walk for those services. But if I drive, it's a 2-minute drive rather than a 15-minute drive that many people face to get their groceries or to go to their pharmacy. So I think we were designing the south end to be a 15-minute community, which it'll all help. We've done a very good job of protecting our natural heritage lands. And our environmental protection area. We have never allowed, in my 22 years on council, not a single building has been built on environmental protection land. We've never allowed it. So I think we have a pretty good record.
And going forward, what do you think needs to do different, or your emphasis is on implementing the plan that is in place? So execution
that's
is
right.
Your pitch for the voters.
Sorry, what was that?
Is your pitch for the voters is that you need somebody in, as a mayor who can execute the plan which is already in place?
Just make sure that we follow it. I mean, it's an ambitious plan, and we have to get going on it in the next 4 years, which is this term, and we have to start working towards meeting those goals, whether it's a new building we're putting up to meet today's standards, or start electrifying our fleet, that sort of thing.
Yeah, another issue, few months back, there was a black young student, who was called N-word in the school, one of the Simcoe County schools, and when her mother went to complain to the school, she did not get the response, did not get the support that she wanted from the school. So that's one issue of racism in some of the school incidents. And then we have policing, which has a big budget. Recently the city of Toronto allocated, I think, $1.8 billion for policing, and not much for other services. So that seems to be the pattern across, not only in Barrie, Toronto, but across most of the city in North America. Councillor Keenan tried to reduce the budget and allocate to different areas. So in terms of fighting racism and replacing police, not entirely, but some of the policing aspect with mental health services and other support system rather than using the force. So what is your plan and thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, zero tolerance towards racism within City Hall or any of the city services. We have an anti-racism task force, which has made one presentation to council, and I suspect they'll make a presentation to the new council as well. In terms of defunding the police, I mean, I agree with the general concept of what it means, and I think it doesn't mean cutting police budgets. It means putting more focus on preventing crime, getting to the sources, more, you know, getting help for people that are homeless, people that have mental health issues, and we're starting to do it. Even the police recognize it. I shouldn't say even the police. The police are actually, I think, ahead of the curve in recognizing it. They've, you know, they now go out on a pilot project with a RVH worker, a nurse from RVH, on calls that might involve mental health issues. And I think it's a great idea. And the idea in my mind is, you know, the nurse would go out and they'd identify the person, and then they would follow up and work with that person to prevent the police from having to go to future calls. You know, the county did something very similar with their paramedics. You know, an astounding number of calls for the paramedics were coming from the same people. There was like 100 people making up 20% of the calls, like people that would call paramedics constantly with an issue, and it wasn't really necessary. So what they did is they made a program where paramedics would spend time with these people and say, you know, what is the issue here? See if we can help your issue, and to reduce those number of calls. And I think it's the same thing with calls that the police are now responding to that probably are dealing with mental health issues or maybe drug addiction issues. Get the help those people need so they're not calling the police all the time, or other people aren't calling the police on them. I think it's really important. It's, you know, what's called, you know, catching the people upstream rather than dealing with the downstream consequences all the time. I think it's really important that as a city, we work with our police, which we don't have control over. As a mayor, I would be sitting on the police commission, so I'd have a bit more of a say. But right now, they're very good about working with council, but we can't ask them to do things. We can ask them to do things, but we don't control them. They report to the very police commission. But I think police are recognizing. I mean, I use it as a simple symbolic example of the police. You know, they've recently gone to these blue and yellow checked cars, what look like British police cars. I think that's a 180-degree turn from where police were 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, Barrie police were buying stealth cars, which people couldn't see. And they suddenly realized that, well, actually, that's the wrong approach to policing. We want to be seen. People want to be able to see the police are there. And I mean, I think that's the future of policing. As I mentioned, I've been with the police going through the encampments. They know everybody by name. They talk to them. Unfortunately, they're checking for vital signs, sometimes. But they're getting to know the people, and that's a form of crime prevention. They're looking for illegal activities because the encampments have been the scene of some trafficking of both dangerous drugs and women. They're looking for dangerous activities in them to prevent them from happening. And I'd like to see that expanded throughout the city, especially the downtown. I'd love to see more police officers walking on foot through the downtown, not to make arrests, not to bust heads, just to get people, just to know people. They know everybody. They know the homeless. They know the merchants. They know the shoppers, and just get to know them, because that's a form of crime prevention in itself. I often say that our current bus terminal, which there's a police substation in, is exactly wrong. You don't know they're in there. They've got blacked out windows. I mean, if they're going to have a substation downtown, it should have open windows. They should open counters. In fact, people should be able to see the police officers working there, so they know there's a police presence. I mean, I think for me, that's what it means about getting police out in the community, getting other people to do the job that police are now doing that could probably do it better. Police probably should be spending more time cracking down on speeders, probing break-ins, investigating assaults, that sort of thing, investigating the trafficking of drugs, which is part of the Simcoe Muskoka opioid strategy. I mean, those are the kind of things we want police doing, not bothering the homeless or entering mental health calls where there's no need to.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned about downtown. Last night usually I go a little early for a walk after dinner, but last night I was late, and there was a group of youngster, and I was about to go on that sidewalk, and I see a group of youngsters, and I got a little nervous going there near them. They seem to be loud, and then I just saw a police van stopped at the red light, and I felt safe. At the same time, I was nervous looking at the police. So I felt good that these people might be little bit, they will behave properly looking at the police car, but at the same time, I didn't know how police will react seeing me at that, near that group of people. So I agree that, their police needs to be, look more approachable, rather than when I see them, sitting in their big cruisers, I feel that, they are not accessible, they are not approachable, and, they are looking down on everyone with their big car. And I definitely, do not feel very safe, when I see police going around like that. But you talked about the policing, and so the next, the question is about the opioid crisis. You supported the whole council unanimously approved the safe injection site, but we are waiting for the provincial government to give the go ahead. So you already said that one of the debates that you already met the provincial government, you're talking to them, but they refuse to provide the timeline when the site will be open. So other than waiting for the provincial government, what will be your plan to deal with the opioid crisis?
I mean, it's just to support the Simcoe Muskoka opioid strategy. I mean, they're the experts in it. They've got a plan to reduce. I mean, we literally hundreds of Simcoe County residents have died over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, that's beyond belief that many. I mean, we had 300 or 400 people dying in car accidents. I mean, it would be a major news story. The fact that they're dying of opioids doesn't make their deaths any less tragic. I mean, those are all people that have families, they have mothers and fathers and maybe daughters and sons. And I think we have to address it. And the experts say this is the best way to reduce it. And we often get people saying, well, safe consumption site isn't going to save everybody. And it's, shouldn't we get them into treatment instead? Well, yes, that's all part of the overall strategy. There's got 5 pillars, and the safe consumption site's just part of one pillar. It'll save some lives. It's definitely saved lives everywhere. Everywhere they've been set up, lives are saved. People are revived in them. It'll save some of them. And yes, we need treatment. We need enforcement. We need all those things. But safe consumption sites are part of it. It's I find it really bizarre that the province even asked them, made it part of the requirement that municipalities have to give their blessing. We're not asked for anything else. When the province sets anything else up, if the zoning is good, which a clinic is as a clinic, you can go anywhere that's zoned properly in Barrie. I do not know why they made Barrie Council have to give its permission for it. It just never made any sense. And people always look at the worst examples of safe consumption sites and say, see what happens in this part or that. But I mean, Peterborough Safe Consumption Site just celebrated its first anniversary, I believe. Go online and look up stories on them. It's been praised by downtown merchants, everybody in Peterborough. I couldn't find a single negative thing to say about their safe consumption site. Some of them can work. So let's concentrate on making the Barrie, if we ever get the safe consumption site, let's make it work. Let's figure out the way to handle it so that it works for the neighborhood, it works for the city, it works for the addicted.
Yeah, and my last couple of questions. One is about Indigenous issues. I was speaking to Mayor Jeff Lehman during the Tuesday's flag raising ceremony, just on the same week of the National Truth and Reconciliation Day, and his advice. I asked him, what is his advice for incoming mayor and the council. He asked, not to treat the relationship with Indigenous people as just any other relationship. So what is, and not this Truth and Reconciliation Day, but last Truth and Reconciliation Day, I believe you were there, and one of the things you said during your address was, there's enough of talking from the politicians like me, and it's time for us to listen to what Indigenous people has to say. So how you will work with the Indigenous community, organization like Barrie Native Friendship Center and other Indigenous organization and groups to forward the truth and reconciliation and provide more support, whether for, we know when it comes to homelessness or opioid crisis, Indigenous people are affected far more than any other group.
Yeah, first of all, Deepak, you've got an amazing memory. But anyways, can remember what I said a year ago. Yeah, and the same thing. I mean, the city's already working with, and consulting on anything that major we're doing in the Indigenous community is consulted. And we've certainly cooperated very well with them on the archaeological dig at Allendale Station, for example. That's just one example. I think it's important that we consult with them. We go to events. We go, we also be seen in the community. So if the, hopefully the powwow will be back in the future. That's the important thing, to go to it and show your support and meet the people, meet regularly with the people from the various organizations, Bannock or the Native Friendship Center. I think there's a lot of symbolic things we can do too. I put a motion on council a couple of years ago. We got a list of the street names we approve a list of the street names that developers can use, and there was no Indigenous names on there whatsoever. Nothing that indicated our the Indigenous people. And so I asked council or asked staff to come back with a list that is a bit more reflective of the diversity of our society, not just Indigenous, but there were no women on the list. There were the streets weren't being named after women, weren't being named after any other our communities in Barrie. So that's kind of a symbolic thing we can do. In fact, I recently attended the installation of Kevin Weaver, who's the new president of Georgian College. And one of the first things that they've done, he unveiled that day, was they've changed their crest at Georgian College to include Indigenous symbols, sort of a turtle and this kind of thing. And I think that maybe that's something the city of Barrie should look at. That's the kind of symbolic thing which it's not earth-shattering, but it does make a bit of a difference. Even the fact we're doing a land acknowledgement before meetings now, that's the kind of thing. So I think there's many things we can do to, acknowledge our, meet the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, and just to acknowledge the Indigenous past of our area.
Yeah, just last couple of quick questions. One is about,
Sure.
We have various nonprofit organizations in Barrie, doing great work. Whether it's Gilbert Center, Elizabeth Fry Society, David Presby Center, Barrie Food Bank that you mentioned. We have Ryan's Hope, Barrie Native Friendship Center. So in terms of working with these organizations and providing them resources and help that they need, because they are doing a lot of work that ideally government is supposed to do, housing and providing food to people. So what will be your strategy in terms of working with them, but also involving them into decision making, because they are connected at the grassroots level with people actually facing these problems in Barrie?
Yeah, I mean, it's complex in Barrie. I'm not trying to pass the buck, but social services delivered by the county, and which four of us sit on, and as mayor I would continue to sit on county general committee for social services purposes, where we have some input as to what goes on. I mean, a lot of those groups get money from the county, which includes money from Barrie taxpayers, but they are working. And I know the county is reviewing how it's providing services, to those various groups out there. So I think that's the main way we can keep supporting them. I guess as a mayor, the best thing I can say is, don't get in their way. If somebody from one of those organizations comes to you with a way to help, let's do everything we can to not prevent them from helping. I think that's the best thing we can do. I mean, we cannot fund them directly. That is a county responsibility. But there's lots of other things we can do. I mean, certainly when Cornerstone, Councillor Natalie Harris brought Cornerstone to us and said they wanted to set up a women's treatment center, a women's addiction treatment center, council can't fund it. That's not our job. But we can do things. We provided them with, I think it was a $400,000 loan to acquire a building. And we provided them with the right to collect textiles in the city of Barrie to help fund their operating costs. So those are the kind of creative solutions we can find to support our local groups that want to help, short of actually providing them with direct funding.
Yeah, and then my last question is, we have a number of candidates running, but at least there are few prominent candidates. One is Gerry Marshall. He was a mayor and also Simcoe County Warden. And then we have Alex Nuttall, he's a former city councillor and member of parliament from Barrie Springwater, Oro Medante. So in terms of what differentiates why should people vote you instead of these other two people? So what differentiates you from other candidates?
Well, first of all, I think most Barrie residents love our city. They really like living here, especially newcomers. I'm constantly amazed when I'm talking to newcomers at the door or elsewhere in the off top of what a great city Barrie is. People are so friendly. Oh, we have a beautiful waterfront. They'll even say we have a beautiful downtown, which a lot of long-timer residents don't think so, but I think we do have a beautiful downtown. And so I think it's important, I'm running to preserve those services, to protect the things that are important to people. We have to enhance areas that need enhancement, but in general, I think I'm running not to shake it up. And I think I can provide the leadership. I've been on council a long time. I know all the people. I know the people provincially and federally and the county, the surrounding area mayors. I've worked with them in the past. I think I can provide the kind of leadership that will unite council. I've been very respectful of others' views. I think they know that. They know I don't make a decision based on somebody who's proposing the idea. It's based on the merits of the idea itself. So I think I'm the best person that can lead Barrie over the next 4 years, but you're going to be critical. Our population is going to double over the next 20 years. We have a lot of planning to do. And I think I'm the one that can best plan for the next 20 years to ensure that Barrie residents continue to enjoy the city they have today.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, Barry, for joining me today, and good luck with your campaign and October 24th voting. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks again for the opportunity.